Can one, after choosing to follow the ethnic path, go their entire life without even the hint of a presence of them? More overt hints, not mere speculations, being they have personalities. Could they just choose to never want anything to do with you over something done, even if out of ignorance?
All right. Long answer short. Correct. All right. Show over. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. This was Hyperborean Radio. I was the guru, or the Celtic guru, which is what I was dubbed for a moment. I'm Celtic God, and you are?
The Lore Keeper. And yeah, you have successfully beaten gurus in intellectual combat with ease, so we don't really view
Gurus
as
ain't
a
got
positive.
shit on me.
Gurus ain't got shit on anybody. They're good at going,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Pretty much, if you can utter some common sense, that's all that takes.
Well, there's an entire book out there called not a book, a poem called the Havamal that everyone gushes over and jizzes over, and it's literally just a book of common sense.
Yeah. But, yeah, it was a good question that was asked of us, and pretty much it's a big answer, even though it's also a short answer. But the short answer sounds hopeless, but it's not.
No, but one of the main things to bring up is the gods, we've said it before, we'll say it again. They aren't on clouds, just twiddling their thumbs, waiting for prayers to come up to them so that they can answer you. They're not like, please like me, good sir.
Let me check my text messages. Yeah, that's not what they're doing. They're not sitting there waiting. But in short, it is possible to go your entire life without seeing direct evidence of the gods. But it is also possible that you could be seeing them all the time and not recognizing it.
Well, it's something we've actually brought up before in regards to many of the gods. You could literally pass them on the street and not notice.
Yeah. And there's also the possibility that they just might not notice you because you might not be, I don't know, representing them enough, or they think that you're pretty all right because you don't need their help. There's also that possibility. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. But in general, you want to be careful trying to draw their attention because like what we was just talking about with when the person was, okay, I'm convinced that they was just trying to win me over with, well, I venerate Tyr. The first question out of my mouth is why? If you get their attention, like with Tyr, you're going to be constantly presented with making the choice for justice. And you don't have to keep it. You don't have to make that choice, but you will be constantly presented with the choices of, do I do what's right or do I do what's easy? Do I do what's right or do I do the thing that nets me large reward?
Well, and that's the thing, is if you try to have the god of justice as your patron and you keep choosing unjust acts, having his attention would actually be an extreme detriment because now you are in the path of actually an enemy of justice.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll even pick those simply because you just want to go with the flow. You're not doing it to be an unjust or an ignoble individual. You're just kind of going with the flow. You're the dead fish, not the salmon.
Right. Or you might want to be this person. You think that you want to be this person. Then you get their attention and holy shit, life just got rough.
Well, we also...
We've known each other for a few years. You've seen where these choices are consistently presented to me.
Well, and picking the just choice, especially in modern society, is not always a positive.
No.
It is the right choice.
No good deed shall go unpunished.
But it's not necessarily the easy or even the helpful choice. Because,
Right.
like, our goal is to start a pagan town and actually revivify the culture, revivify our natural spirituality. We don't bring it up very often because people start thinking we actually
Right, because
have
we
it.
don't have it yet.
Yeah, so don't talk too much about things that you're working towards because talk is cheap.
Pretty much all the personalities on media will tell you that because they've all made the mistake of talking about what it is that they're working towards. And then there's lots of people think that they're already there.
Yes, but we've actually had people straight up offer to get us to pay for the land in exchange for position. And if we had taken them up on that offer...
Well, my naive self shot him down without even realizing
that's how
what was going on.
That's how inherent the just choice is to you, is even without realizing that there's a just and unjust choice, you just answer honestly. And we could have had the land for 2 years now if we had just taken that guy up on his offer. And the money. we chose not to. We chose the just decision, which is not to sell out our people for money. Not to use a Christian comment, the 30 pieces of silver.
Yes.
And like we've said before, our religion is not a specific God, it is our people. But that's the sort of thing. It's like if you honor a God of mercantile decisions, it's actually an odd situation because, like, let's say you're a God of merchants. Then if you're too nice and too kind with your haggling, then you're actually working against kind of the patronage of a God of merchants.
Right, but if you're also crooked, same thing.
Oh, yeah. The God of merchant doesn't like you to be crooked, but if you keep giving people such good deals that you start losing money, the God's going to be like, what the frick? Are you incompetent?
Yeah.
Actually, there was a good line of this in American Gods, but this is Odin in that they actually acknowledge he's the god of thieves.
Mm-hmm.
But he gives the character of Shadow a list of things to do, and he says, and I ask that you only skim a maximum of 10% since money's tight right now. And he's like, I'm not going to steal from you. And Odin just gives him a weird look, and he's like, if you can't take care of yourself, how can you expect me to believe
or how can I expect you
to
take care of me?
Yeah. And it's an honest question because from Odin's perspective, if you're not willing to skim a little off the top, you're just too self-sacrificing. It's ridiculous.
Right. It just doesn't make any sense to him. And it's that way with all the various deities. But there's a later comment where he mentions staring into the abyss, which I don't really understand, but I'm guessing he means like hopelessness, being lost.
Well, the abyss means different things to different people. For some of them, it's a messed up anime TV show. But
to normal humans then.
Yes, to normal humans, it's the blackness, the bleakness, a lot of people from my generation and your generation, just our people in general in the last 100 years or so, have been really depressed, which is what a lot of people will use the term staring into the abyss for, is basically a metaphor for depression.
Here's the thing, really, if you're living nobly with strength, courage, and wisdom, the gods are going to come to you. And even if they don't, it shouldn't matter because you're living with and for your people. You're living a life worth living. You're also living a life worth remembering.
Yes, you're living with honor. You're living with nobility. And here's the thing. There is honor among thieves, but there's a different code of honor among, say, a thieves guild than there is among warriors, than there is among farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all honor.
These are different code systems.
Yeah, it's different guidelines.
Yes.
And that's how Hyperboreans work. We did multiple posts on it. We like to dance around rules. We view rules as challenges to be overcome.
Yeah. Even if you don't realize it consciously, you end up treating it that way where, I can only have 2 cups of coffee a day. I shall have 2 1/4 because it's not 3. Well, what if I have 2 3/4? That's not 3
Or
cups.
you can only have 1 slice of pizza. Proceeds to cut the pizza so the slice goes all the way to the end.
Right.
And takes half the pizza, but it's 1 slice. You can only have 1 cookie, so the cookie's the size of a large pizza.
Right. It's just, really, it's the way that we do things. And nothing is hopeless so long as you are nurturing the strength, courage, and wisdom. And besides that, there's other people that feel the same way, which was another one of my responses is there's a lot of people when they're first coming in ethnic faith and they start realizing harsh realities. Like they reject all these, how to put it gently, these woo-woo feel-good lies that all these other channels put out. Well, not all of them, but most of them put out. Where just feel your way through it and the positivity, feel the positivity. Once they realize that's just a line of shit, then they're faced with this stark bleakness. Except for it's not bleak.
Well,
it's just not filled with rainbows and lollipops.
Well, and here's the thing is when you embody a god, it goes both ways. There's expectations on the other end, but there's also the influence of just thinking about the god.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are not... What's that line from Batman? You are not who you are inside. It is not who you are inside, but what you do that defines you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you endlessly think about a god of thieves, for instance, it's going to affect your personality in a way you might not view it as a positive.
Well, and let's pull this up to the meme because this has been shared around widely, even outside of pagan circles, where you have the witch being burnt at the stake, and then the guy that's lighting that's tying her up and lighting the fire says, on the sly, he whispers to her, "I agree with everything that you did or everything that you say." That doesn't change the fact that he tied her to the post and lit the fire.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't. Everybody in that crowd could agree and think that she was a good person and was doing noble things, but simply by standing there and not doing anything against what's happening.
Well,
there's also an intention too. So just doing a thing also isn't enough. I mean, following the ethnic path it's difficult for a lot of reasons, but it should also be extremely easy and natural.
Well, and it's something we've brought up before is ethnic faith is hard, not because it's hard, but because we're basically a race of circus bears that have to be taught how to be bears again and how to not be circus bears.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, to not be circus bears. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Because
you don't have to teach the circus bear how to be a bear. You just have to teach it stop playing in the circus.
Yes. It's something that does become a bit of an issue in ethnic faith is people trying to basically make it into Christianity 2.0,
mm-hmm.
which is odd considering which came first, but that's besides the point. And what you have is most of the gods are not. I don't really know what people
let's back
think
up
they are.
and be honest, where the gods are tertiary.
Oh, yeah.
The gods themselves, no matter how important, no matter how big they are, no matter how widespread they are, they're tertiary to ethnic faith.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've brought this up before, is the people are the focus. And it's
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons why I stopped saying atheists could be pagan. It's not that you have to truly believe in the gods to be ethnic faith, to be pagan or whatever. It's that you have to believe in your own strength and power and the strength and power of your people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain mindset that goes with that.
Well, and right now it's really difficult. I understand. It is very, very difficult because there's so many shitty people out there.
Well, yeah, it's like, what did that one meme say? Stop caring what other people think. Have you seen other people? They're awful.
True, there's a lot of awful people out there, but there's also a lot of good people out there.
Well, it's like it's really common for this stupid gender war that happens online. So, like, a lot of the men end up going like, those darn women got us into this, and the women are like, how dare you, you weak-willed soy boy fops.
Yes.
It just turns into this
name-calling circle, and nobody's accepting responsibility when really the responsibility lays on both sides, both the masculine and the feminine, but no matter what, it is still the mortal realm that is responsible, not the divine realm.
Well, here's the thing, is the gods, doesn't really matter which one you pick, but they have their own goals, they have their own ways of doing things. They are not under any obligation to help you specifically. And here's the thing. The gods may make decisions for the betterment of the whole of the people, as best as they're able to maneuver. Mm-hmm. You are probably inconsequential. It's like if you have a kingdom, how many potato farmers does the king personally know?
And it's fair because you're trying to help as many people as possible. There's going to be people that fall through the cracks, and it's not even necessarily that you don't care. You just don't know, and you're too busy to go around looking for all the cracks.
Well, and it's something that you just realize whenever you've lived, because there are people that I used to, talk to a lot. I barely remember their names now.
Mm-hmm. And
it's from years and years and years ago.
Well, let's think about it even from a family perspective. If you have more than two people in the family, somebody gets forgotten at some point. It wasn't through intentional negligence. It wasn't through I don't like that person. Sometimes it is, but then you didn't forget them. You just chose not to. But sometimes people just get forgotten. That old joke of mom forgot me at the store.
Mom forgot me at the store. I was dropped off by the FedEx person. I'm the milkman's kid, or
it's not necessarily malevolence.
Well, if anyone,
or malicious intent.
Well, I grew up with 6 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would sometimes call me by one of my other siblings' names, or sometimes names that I think were like her backups when she was naming me, based on the fact that she almost always used the same 2.
Right.
But it was just something that would occasionally happen, especially if she was frazzled.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't look anything like my siblings. But basically, it just happens because there's too much stuff going on. And even if the gods are us, but more, so they have more memory, more ability, more skill, more of those things, they are not under any obligation to give a shit about you specifically.
Right.
They might give a shit about the whole of your nation.
Here's the reality of it. You might not want them to.
Oh,
Not in a direct sense. Like, oh, they came and I don't know. here's one. You are venerating a god that's associated with bears. So a bear wanders out of the forest, and I don't care if you live in the city. It goes into your parking garage and picks a fight with you specifically. Do you want that kind of attention?
Or to take it to another odd spot that might go, you worship a fertility god, and they take special notice of you. So you want 3 or 4 kids. You end up with 27.
Right. There's all kinds of possibilities. Some of them are good. Like, I don't know. You might always be lucky, and the God's showing you just enough attention. Not too much, but just enough to where everything just happens to go your way in this one regard. Bravo. But that might not always happen.
Well, it's part of the reason why there's many different ways to venerate the gods, and this kind of direct one-on-one relationship. Like we said, you don't need...
Honestly, it's asking too much.
It's asking too much. It's like if someone has 27 or even 50, 100 grandkids, who knows? They won the birthing lotto. How likely is it they know all 100 grandkids on a personal level?
Yeah, I guarantee you it's not.
They forgot most of you.
Yeah.
They forgot
They
most
know
of
that they have 100 grandkids. They love their 100 grandkids.
But they have like 5
always forget
favorites.
about Tommy.
They have like 5 favorites.
Yeah. It's the harsh reality of life. And it doesn't make grandma less caring. It doesn't make her less loving or a lesser person. It makes her human.
She has a hard enough time remembering the 13 kids.
Right.
So it's...
The 13 kids who had 13 kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's one of the reasons we always emphasize the who of the gods more than the what. Well, who is Thor? Well, he is the Thunderer. No. That's the what. And that's not even the what. That's like an adjective of the what.
Right.
So, who is Thor?
Which is typically the answer that we get. And no, we're not going to give it to you right now.
No, read stories of Thor. There's lots of them.
Well, and yeah, that's actually kind of why we did that podcast Superman, is we was addressing this notion right here where the gods are something to look up to, aspire to, and to take warnings from, because they are us, but more as extreme as we are. And if you're honest, we are a people of extremes, and these extremes are quite vast. Now multiply that by God levels.
Well, and then remember that people would think if you live for a very long time, you end up, kind of multitasking. But then you're forgetting our people's own nature. We take great pride in being a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
So we get very, very good at carpentry. We could live to be 150, but we've been a carpenter since we were 20, and we're not changing it now.
Right.
We are a stubborn people who, once we've hit that point where we're kind of comfortable, we don't like to leave it.
Right.
Now imagine the gods. Do you really think like the god of craftsmen is going to be like, oh yeah, I'm really good at crafting, but you know what my true passion is? Making
Fishing.
icebreaker candy bars.
Yes, making icebreaker candy bars.
Does sound terrible.
Yeah, it does. It's just not the way that it works, and there's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, the story of the gods, they're lessons for us. Like, well, not just lessons, they're also motivation, aspirations. But there's also warnings in there because of their personality types. Things don't always go their way, and they end up stepping in the mud puddle or causing issues that really they shouldn't have caused, other than their very personality. They're too abrupt, they're too gruff, they're too giving, like with the Dogda, and to where his family had to intercede on his side.
Oh yeah.
Or on behalf of him, because he was giving away so much stuff. He was literally starving himself.
Oh yeah, he was giving away all of his food to the point where one of his family members had to step in and basically be like, he's not going to look. Here, I will put inedible coins, and the idiot will eat it. So the idiot comes by, gets the food from the Dogda, eats the coins, and dies.
So there's a warning there. You aspire to be brave and stern and strong like the Dogda, and kind and giving. But there's the warning there of what happens when you are too kind, too giving, too forgiving.
Well, and I would...
Because the Dogda in that story even knew what was going on.
Yes, but he's too kind to do anything about it. And I would argue that the Dagda is actually fairly well active right now, much like I point out that Othin and Hermes are very active, because all of our people across these lands where the Dagda would be known, we threw open our borders basically.
Yeah.
For Jamal, for Nagambo, for
Juan,
Amir, for all these figures that really have no business being in our lands.
And really, if we're going to give it away, can you blame them for taking it?
Yeah, it's
because a lot of people want to get angry at Jamal and Juan and Magumbo, et cetera, for taking advantage of it. But can you really blame them if we're going to give it away anyways?
Well, it's something that's actually been a criticism that the other races have given us when we've talked to them is your people just give this stuff. What am I supposed to say? No?
Right. I mean, I've had some of them in their own way. They use the word stupid, but then after conversing with them, and I explained, no, naive. They're like, yeah, that makes far more sense because your people are smart, but they're so naive and you don't understand. The rest of the world will gut your country. They will gut your very homes.
Yes, it's something that we've actually acknowledged before, and all the other races are well aware there's a difference between each of the races. We're the only ones that are like, oh, no, we're all the same. It's all just melanin. It's all just skin deep.
And how did they get us? By telling us stories.
Well, and that's how it works, is we as a people, we are storytellers. That's how we learn about our gods. It's how we learn about our heroes, our customs, our history. That's why they corrupt the stories.
Well, and that's one of the reasons for learning the old stories. Is don't ignore the new stories just because they're new stories. But if you learn the old stories, you can then start seeing where the corruption began to happen and kind of pick it out of the news stories and be like, okay, I get it.
Well, and it's part of the reason why it's so important to look at our natural way of doing things. Because if you look at how we tell stories, and we've always told stories this way, whether it's Jack the Giant Slayer, the Three Musketeers, Solomon Kane, Conan the Barbarian, there's a focal point, and we just keep telling stories of that figure, and some people will know them, some people will not, but there's always something there that made them stand the test of time. There's an echo.
Even in old folklore, you can have one character. Let's just roll with characters. Whether it's a god, a folkloric character, a hero, it doesn't matter. But you have one character, and he's this way in this one story and this one situation. And then there's another story where on the surface it might seem completely different, but the who of the character remains the same. Much like Batman is always Batman.
Yes.
Much like Doctor Who used to always be Doctor Who until Doctor Who wasn't Doctor Who, and then all of our people got pissed.
Until Doctor Who was Nurse Who.
Right. Well, and it wasn't even the fact
that she was female,
that they turned it female. I mean, there was people that was really dubious about it, but the first episode with the female doctor was actually had higher ratings than several of the episodes leading up to that. So people was like, well, I'm not sure if I like this, but let me tune in. I'll see. And then it turned out it wasn't just a female doctor with the same core. They actually changed the core of the doctor, and then that's when and
people were rejecting it even when it was Peter Capaldi, who was arguably the best actor they've ever had portray the character, but he was given such bad material.
Well, that's why it was on the decline there. And they was hopeful with the switching of the doctor, even though the doctor was becoming female, they're going to course correct.
Well, that's usually
no.
That's often why they will switch the doctor, is to try and get more people to watch. That's the thing, is the doctor is always the doctor. Batman is always Batman. Conan is always Conan. And
the Dagda is always a Dagda. Lou is always Lou.
Perun is always Perun.
Right, and it doesn't matter what situation that we put them in. The who of who they are needs to stay the same, which is both something for us to aspire to, take courage from, and to take warnings from. And some people might think that we've really deviated from where we started. Not at all.
No, and
this is a massive conversation.
Well, and part of the issue I think a lot of people end up having is, are the gods defined partially by their relationship to the people and the other gods? Yes. But then there's also the other element of, I guess you could describe it kind of like, the best example I can think of in the modern day would be like the Justice League and the Avengers. In the Avengers or Justice League, like the actual overall stories, there's many characters, and not all of them get to be the focal point, but there's entire swaths of stories of these characters where they are the focal point, even if in the actual Justice League story they're a cameo. They're seemingly unimportant.
Yeah. Well, and it's a decent thing to bring up because these are things that people are aware of.
Well,
and they grew up with them. So, like the DC Pantheon, the Marvel Pantheon. Who's in charge? Well, which comic are you reading?
Pretty much.
Are you reading Superman's comic, or are you reading Wonder Woman's comic? Are you reading The Flash's comic? Are you reading Spider-Man's comic?
Which era
That's who's
are
in
you
charge.
reading?
Yeah, which era are you in? And that's another thing that kills a lot of... That's why the who's important, and storytelling is so important. And we need to relearn how to tell stories badly.
And even recently, if we did a character from, like, mythology, they were still consistent. Like Puck, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They might change a little bit of the what or the why.
Well, I mean, there's stories where Puck is a little boy. There's stories where Puck is a giant. There's stories where Puck is a chair.
There's stories where Puck
is always
a
Puck.
wild creature.
Right.
So
But
Puck,
Puck is always Puck.
Yes, and even in recent tellings, like the Gargoyles TV show.
Oh, yeah, and I'm convinced they did that on accident.
Oh, yeah. But Puck was still Puck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because if you pay attention to that TV show, in the story, Puck is in control of every situation.
Yeah.
Like the first episode.
Because it's the Gargoyles cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And they have Oberon, the king of the fairy, and he's so powerful, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Except for you can tell, once you understand who Puck is, and you're watching this cartoon, you're like, Puck is in control, he's in charge, and he's letting Oberon think that he's in charge when he's not.
He's playing with him like a toy.
Yeah.
Or in his first appearance, he literally coordinates his own failure. Like he destroys his own trap so that it makes it look like an accident, but it's his own trap, and it's totally a Puck move.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this continuation of the older mythic gods and spirits into the modern day.
I think that they did it partially on purpose, of course. A little bit of research so that they can develop a character, right? But I think that they got it so spot on accident.
Well, I think that's the same with like American Gods. And American Gods is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Like, right. I would argue that...
Well, it was written by a Polish Jew that did a lot of research.
Yes, because he got Odin...
I'm really disgusted that he got so much right. And so many of our people get so much wrong.
Oh, I've brought that up before. When the best version of Odin I've seen is in the first few episodes of a television adaptation of a comic book / book series written by a Polish Jew who I think lives in England, but he's very popular in America.
And is quick to sell out.
Oh, he's very quick to sell out and to criticize people for criticizing people who are selling out. He got Odin
completely changing his own history and statements.
Oh yeah, he'll straight up lie. He got Odin fairly well in that show, in the series. Not so much for Thor, not so much for Anansi. There were a lot of gods from various pantheons. Mm-hmm. Got way off. But he did Odin fairly well. I don't really know how he did it, honestly.
Complete accident, probably.
Probably.
Like, he was probably trying to make him not seem like a good god, which he's not a good god, but... trying to make him seem worse than what he is, and then accidentally, by making those conscious choices, accidentally revealed who Odin is.
Well, it's very telling that everybody's favorite stories of Odin, and this is their side comments, like the Eye in Mimir's Well, the making of Ask and Embla, everybody's favorite stories, or the rune thing. They're a side
Well,
comments.
Are they favorite stories, or are they just talking points?
In
most of our circles, let's be honest, they're talking points.
They're asides. There's no actual stories of them. They're mentioned, but they're mentioned as an aside. The actual stories that feature Odin all feature him as a thief, a gambler, things that people don't actually like associating with him. And it's very telling that a lot of people don't read the stories.
Well, and that's like Odin's Eye and Mimir's Well. If they show an actual well... walk away. They're wrong. Well, it's not an actual well in the sense of like a well that's a hole down in the ground. You lower the bucket in.
No, it's like an old school like.
It's not even
really
like a
well.
Spring well that comes up out of the ground, which would look kind of like a clear water mud puddle. No, it's a freaking muddy waterfall.
Yes, and those do occasionally form just ponds that seem to disappear.
Right, but basically, it's Tequamanon Falls.
Yeah.
No, Niagara Falls would be too clean. So it's basically Niagara Falls. It's a muddy waterfall.
And this is the kind of stuff people don't like because it doesn't sound as cool.
Right. And this is why we're on the naughty list and people are scared to share us because we actually know the stories, and if we don't, we look into them.
Well, yeah, I'm the first to admit I have a bias towards the Germano-Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I get most of my information. I know sadly a good amount more in a lot of the other areas than people that actually practice. Like I've out-argued Slavs, and I don't actually know that much about Slavia.
Well, for one, you don't even really have to know their stories. All you have to do is understand our people, and then let them tell you the story. And because you understand the psychology, the physiology, our psyche, the very core of who we are as a people, you can come to understand these stories without even actually learning the story on your own.
Well, and like we said at the beginning,
and kind of spot the bullshit that's in them.
Oh yeah,
especially if you have just a loose concept and understanding of what Christianity and Hinduism and Islam is, because there's different amounts of fuckery with the stories of different kinds depending on where in Europe.
Oh yeah, sometimes you end up with the weird alien cults.
Right. So long as you have a loose concept of those, you can kind of pick them out when you run across them, but you also understand fundamentally who our people are. It makes the stories easier. You don't have to know all the stories. You just have to understand who we are as a people, which then leads into another part of this topic with people being treated for mental illnesses that they don't have or shouldn't have.
Well, and a lot of it comes down to trying to average out all the races.
Right. We live in a universalistic society.
So, and it's not just us, because when you average out all the races, you don't magically end up with, I don't know, the Africans are normal.
Right. Exactly, because you look into treatments for psychological ailments, I believe is what they're called. But it's on the rise all across the board. Every race in the Western world, the rates of insanity are on the climb.
Well, and you can actually see...
And they're going almost straight up and have been for the last several decades.
Well, and you can see elements of, like, I've brought this up before. Thor would be diagnosed as bipolar by modern standards because he will switch from being extremely gleeful to incredibly wrathful at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. It's not that there was no trigger, quote unquote, that switched those. It's that it happened so quickly that a doctor would diagnose him as bipolar.
Right, and if there's an actual reason for it, it's not insanity. There's nothing medically wrong. There was an actual reason why he went from laughing to smashing somebody's head in with a hammer. It wasn't just because there was a reason for him to do that.
Well, it's like the goddesses of love and sex would be labeled nymphomaniacs.
Well, like a lot of our people talking to people of other races, they're like, white people are weird. You guys will be laughing and joking and nothing seems to bother you, and then all of a sudden you're stabbing motherfuckers.
Well, and it actually
just instantly, just raging angry. And the thing is being Hyperboreans, we understand that is not actually what happened, but that's the way it's viewed, which makes us look insane.
Yes, and you can actually see this in the mythology across the board, like in the Celtic gods. There's a lot of them that behave in ways that, like, the Dagda, he comes off like, I don't remember what the illness is called, but it's compulsive giving.
Mm-hmm.
They would diagnose him with whatever that illness is. It's probably some kind of syndrome.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember what it's called. I looked it up a few days ago just out of curiosity, and yeah, there is some kind of syndrome or something for it. But here's the thing is, from psychology, they're coming from a universalistic perspective. So whether they intend to or not, they're averaging out all of the races. And these should be the responses for the standard human, taking all of the ethnic quirks and averaging them out. Well, that doesn't make for a sane person. What that does is make all the races seem insane, which is not accurate.
No, and it's one of the things that we keep trying to push is if you're doing ethnic faith, you start to realize who we are.
Yeah.
Because it's actually something people have noticed with, like, other cultures. For, like, the Ainu, for instance. They have a story of a great flood. And people thought, oh, this is a traditional Ainu story, and it reflects that the Bible is accurate, and the Great Flood and all that. But someone had the actual wherewithal to ask the Ainu, like, where'd you hear this story? Oh, I heard it from someone who told me. Well, is there any white man that you...
Well, he even told a joke about it, because he's like, every white man who has come here and asked about this story has written it down. Do you know the one who didn't write it down? The one that told me.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's because every white man that would come and hear the flood story would buy him booze. Mm-hmm. And the Ainu were white at one point, but I think by this point they were mostly chimeras. And still really hairy, which tells you how hairy the freaking Ainu were.
Right.
But it's one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant when someone's like, well, this similarity between this folklore and this folklore. Okay. Who wrote it down? Who discovered it? How long have they been in contact with white people? Because especially the Christian missionaries, they find out that there's some...
well, like the dude that went to that one island and then got shot to death.
Oh, yeah, and I think he got shot to death with bows and arrows or spears.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
bows, arrows, and spears, I believe. And it was some island...
off the coast of India, I think.
Yeah.
But basically the guy went there to convert them. If they find out there's one heathen area in existence, they are sending missionaries. To go. And then they will tell the stories. So by the time you're actually getting folklore from these areas, it's like there's Native American folklore that is, I know the story. It's beat for beat a European story. What happened was
the Iron John story?
Yeah, not Iron John. John of the Bear.
That's
John of the Bear. Iron John is a different one. But John of the Bear, it is John of the Bear beat for beat. And everyone's like, well, you see, that shows the pan-northern hemisphere story. No, it shows they were in contact with Spaniards or French fur trappers because it's a story from that area. And people used to know their folklore.
Yeah. And there was fun stories to tell, even if they didn't personally believe it, although really most of them did believe it.
Well, it's like the people like Joan of Arc. But I'm a good Christian girl. You worship fairies at a tree. Well, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, and it's the way it is. But, and it's not that there aren't issues, but like if you suffer from depression, once you understand, it's a Hyperborean thing that depression is actually fairly normal for us. It makes the depression not so depressive. Then it's like, okay, this is just a normal part of the cycle. I fell into depression. I know how to treat this. I get my ass up even though I don't want to get up. I just want to lay here and just die. Because, and depression isn't always that extreme, but let's pretend it is in this case. Because you understand depression is normal, it makes it easier for you to get up, to get into the shower, to put on the clean clothes, to go outside and shake babies and kiss hands. Well, which will get you over the depression.
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily, because people will think, oh, you got over the depression because you hung out with people. Not necessarily.
No. Yeah.
It was just
anybody
doing
that
stuff.
has depression understands. And it might take several days of doing this to kind of push through it, but you also understand, because it's a normal thing for our people, it can kill us. Well, depression literally can kill us, and it's not even suicide. It's lay there and just die. It does literally kill, but once you understand that, it's normal for our people. Well, not getting depressed is actually the abnormality.
Yeah, they got some interesting drugs then.
Yeah. Or there's just something wrong with the brain where they just never actually get this, and they're the ones that's considered normal. But the depression is actually the normality, not normal state, but it is normal for our people to hit depression. We understand, okay, I have to do this, this, and this to get out of it. Well, and if I don't, I never will.
Well, and it's actually, once you start understanding our people, you look into history and our folklore and all these different elements, you start noticing things like we've brought this up before as well, which is the hibernation. Our people actually, according to history, we semi-hibernate.
Mm-hmm. Especially where it gets cold.
Yeah. So, like, you're not probably going to do it in southern Florida.
No.
But you might do it in Minnesota. And they even kind of did it in the UP when you were a kid. It was, they didn't acknowledge what it was, but people were sleeping a lot more. And
people would sleep like 12 hours a day, every day or more if they was left alone.
Oh, yeah. And the reason that it's actually the reason I started thinking about it, and then I started digging into history to see if it was a thing, was I noticed that it's really common for our people to have seasonal depression.
Right. And we have the seasonal depression because we aren't doing the semi-hibernation, which is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense for people that live in the northern hemisphere, evolved in the northern hemisphere, and are as adapted to the northern hemisphere as we are, to get depressed for 3 months straight.
Or 6. Or 6. However long the winter is in the area that we live in.
Yeah, I think we would have died already just due to the ice age.
Seasonal depression, and then for Hyperboreans, there's also the seasonal mania, which is when in the summertime you can't sleep. You just can't sleep. It's too hot. It's too bright. It's just too much something to be able to actually sleep.
Rosario is too pretty.
Right. So then our sleeping schedule ends up dropping down to like 3-4 hours a day. The darkest part of the night in the middle of the summer, but we have this mania because we can't sleep in the summer, and then we have this depression in the winter. Well, you take these two things and you put them right back to back, where you're not allowed to sleep in the winter the way that your body wants you to in the north. And you can't, but yeah, and you compound that lack of sleep with the lack of sleep in the summer. There's issues that's going to crop up. It also explains our addiction to caffeine. It explains our addiction to distraction. It explains a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah. And this is a lot of what we push and point out with ethnic faith is if you look at our stories, our history, our own natures, you start to get more balanced.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just have this swing between the extremes. You're able to find kind of a core.
Right. So then let's ask, well, what does that have to do with the gods? The gods are a lesson of balance.
Yes, because the gods are odd. Actually, you'd think they would be extremely balanced because they're gods. But no, they are themselves quite often actually very extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more developed. They're more capable. They're typically stronger, faster, better. The $6 million man.
Yes.
But they, because of our own natures, they actually end up veering to the extremes. Like Othin is extremely willing to risk his neck if he can get something out of it.
Or to crush somebody else that has no idea what's even going on.
Oh, yeah, as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Or Thor.
Or without a thought, not even an afterthought, like not even that much thought. Just he's there and just crush him and no thought.
Well, like Thor, he'll be so manic that he'll end up coming home with 3 kids.
Right.
One of them's his, 2 of them he picked up at the farm. Well, I don't know. They were just sitting there in the farm. What was I supposed to do? Just
Nobody wanted them. They was just sitting there.
In the
farm. It's okay to take them, right?
Yeah. I mean, they were eating sandwiches and talking about stuff. I figured they were homeless.
Meanwhile, 3 countries away.
Where'd the kids go? And then on the other end, it's like, well, I had to kill 12 people. They were all making fun of my axe. What axe? Well, it was an axe. It's a hammer now.
It's a hammer now because I hit them all on the head with it, and they had really hard heads. But yeah, it's and that this also kind of addresses that whole abyss feeling. But most of that abyss feeling is it's as the bullshit, the weight of society, the Yahweh shaped hole, if you will. Even if it's not Yahweh, it can be the what the hell is this shit called? The social justice, blah blah blah. I'm a fucking pussycat. That bullshit.
I just call it mental illness.
Yeah, it's the mental illness of modern society falling away, and it can leave a hole in you that you think that you need to fill up, but no. Let it heal. That's a wound.
Well, and if you think about it,
it's not a missing piece. That's a piece that had stuff in it that shouldn't have had stuff in it.
Let it heal before it gets gangrene.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is because you read historical accounts of our people. A lot of them sound ridiculous. Like they'll have one that says like on the coasts of Britain, women have multiple husbands and people keep pet rabbits all over the place. And I'm like, let's see, coastal port, woman with a lot of husbands. I'm guessing what it was most likely a whore.
Yeah, yes.
Or
more, even more likely, it's modified history for explaining a whore.
Yes. Because, yeah. And then you have really noble ideas that are pushed, like the Celts feared nothing except the sky falling on their head. They would laugh at the storms that tried to sink their boats.
It doesn't mean that they never got scared.
No,
it meant that they chose courage because courage is a choice.
Yes. Bravery is a choice.
They
Actually,
would probably piss in their pants right up until. What's the easiest way to face danger?
is laughing at
is
it.
to laugh at you. Some people like horror movies. People love horror movies, even if they scream and whatnot. Then they end up laughing because they screamed. The laughing is the act of courage. That's the choice. So when faced, I think that's why the laughing at the waves that was crushing the fleet. What else are you going to do? And to face that kind of fear and terror, laugh at it. And it was a conscious choice that they made.
Yes. And it's something that I get kind of irritated because people will say these things. It's sort of like how people will be smug and think it's confidence.
Mm-hmm.
People will be loud and think it's passionate. Our people have gotten to the point where they can't really notice these things about us. We're not very good at determining things like that anymore.
Well, we have things, too, where it's like, oh, are you saying that's a bad person? He's feeding the poor. The poor don't care. Yes, the poor do care. No, that person feeding the poor is a shitty person. They're feeding the poor to look good, to look like a good person, to cover up their shittiness.
Oh, yeah.
Intention matters, which is kind of an extreme of what you was just talking about.
Oh, yeah. Intent really does matter in everything you do. It's like, are you treating the gods like merchants or servants, or are you treating them like respected family members?
Well, and the people that say, well, the poor people don't care, have never been on the poor side of that. I grew up poor. I was on the poor side of that. And yes, those rich, snotty, the poor people can tell and they care. Yes, they will take the stuff because they need it. They don't want to take it, but they need it, so they will. And then as soon as they're away from that rich person that is a piece of crap that was doing the thing just to look good, oh, the shit talking starts. Oh, that person thinks that they're better than us. I hope that they end up in this same position to where I give them things so that they can feel shame.
Well, it's
the poor
really
people
easy.
know, and
Oh, yeah.
it does matter.
And it's really easy to suss them out now because they'll usually take a selfie when they do it.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's easier now to tell. Before you had to watch them because then they'd go to church and brag about it. But
Now they go on Instagram and they're like, hashtag fed my local homeless guy lasagna last night.
right.
Like he's freaking Garfield the cat.
Right. Yeah, it's a complex situation, but I've heard that before. Well, the poor people don't care. Yes, they do. I can tell you right now they do. And I'm not saying don't help them, but if you're gonna help poor people, if you're gonna help anybody, try to do it for the right reasons. And if you're not, at least admit it.
Oh yeah.
Be like, I'm trying to be good. I'm not a good person, and I'm trying to be good. So this is all I got. And that alone, just being honest, is a huge step in the right direction.
And that's the other thing is the reason, because the easiest answer for when people ask, is it possible that you will never get a hint of the gods, that they might never decide to pay attention to you? The easy answer is, well, you see, the gods work in mysterious ways, but they have a plan for the whole diatribe that every universalist religion spouts. The more complex and honest answer is, there's a chance that none of them will even ever acknowledge you existed. The good news is the ancestors exist. The good news is the people in your day-to-day life exist.
And your descendants, should you choose, because that's what it is in most cases, should you choose or be lucky enough to have descendants.
And that's the main thing.
Right, and that's
the
what's going to
people.
get you where it is that you're going anyways.
Well, and the gods actually function. It's like I kind of used the example of the friendly neighborhood deity for gods like Heracles, Thor, Lu, Cuchulainn. They're heroes, but they're also gods. So they're kind of like the superheroes of their day, but like also spiritual figures.
Well, and here's a good question to ask. What kind of people are you drawn to? Most people are drawn to people that have similar interests, similar behavioral patterns, so on and so forth, to themselves. That's who they're drawn to. And that's what causes these friend cliques, right? Why, if the gods are us, why would they be any different? If that's most likely what's going to draw their attention. So just being noble, it increases the odds that they're going to notice, but that might not necessarily be what you want, and or they may or may not notice you because you don't notice everybody that behaves like you, that looks like you, that dresses like you. You just don't.
Well, and a lot of
It's a really hard to answer question because it's a yes, no.
Well, and a lot of it just comes from understanding. Like we've brought up things like, why are women obsessed with candles? It's because for thousands of years they kept an eternal flame going. So it's an instinctive drive that Yankee Doodle candle is just happening to take advantage of. Or like, why do people go around trying to talk up their favorite TV shows? Like, you gotta watch this. It's great. I understand the first few seasons are terrible, but if you get to season 4, it's amazing.
Right.
And
But you have to watch at least this other season, which wasn't as good, so that you can really understand what's going on. Yeah.
Oh, but don't watch that season. That season's terrible.
And stop at this episode, because from there it goes straight down.
What it is they're talking up their pop culture surrogate gods.
Yeah.
Whether that's Rick and Morty, Homer Simpson, Stewie Griffin,
Doctor Who,
Kirk or Picard. These fictional characters are fulfilling
Solomon
the same role.
King, because apparently he's far more popular than I thought he was.
Oh, yeah. I always thought Conan was like the most popular Howard character, but no, it's Solomon Kane.
Which confuses me.
Yeah, Solomon Kane is really popular for some reason. I think some people forget that Howard actually wrote Conan and think it started with like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Uber Chad. Or is it Giga Chad? I'm not
I don't know.
I'm not up with what the cool kids think.
We're not hip.
We're not rad enough, as the 90s surfer commercials would say. Tubular. But that's the things that you start to notice when you realize how our people act based on history, culture, just observance. You start to realize those things, and you realize the gods, they're important, but cults are kind of like fan clubs with spiritual elements.
Right.
It's a terrible analogy, but it's hard to think of a better modern way of looking at it.
Well, and I'm going to give my own little analogy, metaphor, something like
Words.
that. Well, yeah, my own set of words. People coming to ethnic faith, they're like, oh, it's hard, it's rough. Well, no, all you did was pull off from the blacktop highway where you just mind-numbingly go, no thought, just follow the guy in front of you, and you pulled off onto the gravel road. Yes, it's bumpy. Yes, you got to go a little bit slower. It's noisy. But enjoy the scenery. Enjoy the trees that's around you. You pulled off from the highway and onto a 2-track road going through the forest. Slow down. Enjoy the ride.
It might be a
Look
bit
around.
bumpy, but it will be fun.
Yes.
Like, enjoy the period where you're a pilgrim, a pioneer, a rambling man. Enjoy that period, because when you're able to finally get through the mire and the woods and the moors and the seas of what the frick is going on, and you find somewhere comfortable, well, it's like a lot of people. They like that their life is pretty chill right now and they got things settled, but they kind of miss the days when they were eating cold pizza and like, well, you see, I have the bills. I have the money to pay the bills, but, you know, it's in my other car, which is loaned to Fred, who's out in Utah, and
Right.
They almost miss that chaos portion of their lives.
Shoot. We went way deep into this one, and I forgot to bring up our Patreon, which I think that we touched on, that we have a Patreon, and our Teesprings, where you can buy a poster created by Neil Aethelwolf Rundgren. I forgot the name of it.
Where the old gods roam. Yes.
Let me verify this, double check really quick. Okay, really quick. Here it comes. Where the old gods roam. It's a
and thanks to our patrons, because that's who asked the question at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
And got us thinking on this whole thing, and
we're still trying to self-promote. We suck at it, but we're trying. Help us out.
We forget to advertise sometimes, often, almost always.
Right. It's something that we got to do, but it's not something that we want to do.
No, in another time we'd probably just be kind of content. Fishermen, huntsmen, some rough and tumble job, but we
maybe
exist
forgers. Now. I do have a little bit of artistic skill. Oh, wrong kind of forgers.
Yes.
You mean blacksmiths. I was talking about forging money.
Oh, I said forager, not forgers.
Well, I'm old. I'm old and rickety. Well, yeah. We got a few minutes left. Let me see. Yeah, buy our stuff, stickers, posters, shirts. Help us support us on Patreon. You can actually go all the way down to $1. Get your list on get your name on the thank you list. We do pay attention to the Patreon, so if there's any interesting questions, you might end up
starting a podcast
episode.
So, thank you again to our Patreons, and yeah, the thing is whether it's history, whether it's a modern show, whether it's, folklore, whether it's what your grandpa told you he did last Thursday. I found the most amazing melon.
Now I got the old man voice stuck in my head.
Old Bill. I can't do it as well.
When I was a kid, I was young.
But all of our stories, they're sacred stories. And
yes.
the gods,
even the new ones.
Yes, whether it's of the gods, whether it's of the spirits, whether it's of the heroes, whether they're fictional or not, because they continue off each other, they feed off each other. Everything's built on what came before it. It's why we get so upset when stories are messed
And no,
with.
we're not saying venerate Batman or...
No, don't do the Wiccan thing.
Yeah.
Well, I have an altar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
don't do that.
Don't do that, no.
They're
And
character studies, I guess, is
They're
the way to approach that.
Well, they're character studies. They're, to use a term that a lot of people like to throw around a lot, archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Galadriel is not the Morrigan. Galadriel is Galadriel. But in
Right.
that one scene, All Shall Love Me in Despair, you got the Morrigan right there.
Yeah. Which, yeah, in that movie, that one scene, I've gotten more people to understand who the Morrigan is by showing them that one scene than through hours and days of conversation.
Well, and that's the advantage you can get with that, is as much as we may never have the gods show up in our day-to-day lives. My day-to-day lives, the guy who asked the questions, day-to-day lives.
Well, let's be honest. If one of the deities stepped through the veil right here into the living room, we'd probably both shit ourselves and have massive heart attacks.
Maybe grab a knife. Like, how'd you get into
we'll
our...
straight up attack them.
How'd you get in here?
Yeah. There's a lot of possibilities that would happen, and almost none of them are like, oh, wow, one of the deities decided to deign me with their direct presence. No, that would probably almost definitely not happen.
Well, and I mean, do you necessarily, like Zeus, do you want, like, your family to have the attention of Zeus? And Zeus, like, you know what? That's a hot wife. I'm going to turn
Yeah.
into a turkey and then just walk into the house and
I'll
be like,
seduce her with my comb.
yeah, do you like a bald man?
Gobble, gobble.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably don't want that. Probably don't want that happening.
No, you got to be acknowledging that, but
Gobble, gobble.
in general, actually, what we brought up with Galadriel, like, it's like Hagrid. I have described
The dog does.
Yeah, I almost said Hogda, and it's like, no.
Describe the dog that people
as Hagrid the god.
Right. Well, and you can describe the Dogda and just exquisite detail, and they're like, huh? And then you say Hagrid, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah.
And that's an advantage. You can use these fictional characters because they fulfill similar roles mentally.
Right. Well, and like the approach when using Hagrid is it's Hagrid, but this, and this. He's not this, and he's not that, and he's not this other thing. But you're giving them a visual stimulus
and an
emotional connection straight out the gate.
Well, because there are straight up religions around Harry Potter, the Jedi, all these things. And our people are the ones that start them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's our people that start those religions. Even if we didn't create the stories, we end up fleshing the stories out, giving them meaning, and then starting weird religions based on them, because we're looking for something.
Yes, we're trying to
and they
fulfill
don't
a
realize
role.
that we have an ethnic faith.
Well, or people presented as Viking LARPing or pussy magic or cat lady craziness.
Pussy magic, man, I hated that one. That was a big thing.
It's still a big thing. It's just most of them are embarrassed.
I just
of
don't
it
talk
now.
to them anymore.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Or
I run into
bees
them
are the
occasionally.
fairies. No, bees are not fucking fairies.
There are many things that we did a whole podcast talking about these sorts of things. So
Fairies don't even have wings.
no, and most
They
of them
look
aren't that
just
small.
like us. And they're the same size as us. They're not tiny. I don't give a shit what the news stories say. Because I've gotten arguments with people in Ireland, and they're like, oh, they're the wee folk, the wee little tiny little fellers. And I'm like, no, fairy are the same size as us. One could be standing right next to you, and you wouldn't know. Well, those are the old stories. The new ones, they're the wee folk.
Like the stories of the fairy are the new iPod.
It's like, what the fuck? It's really irritating because it's degrading.
It's degrading, it's insulting, and it's devaluing. And it's because, here's the thing. Are we going to know
And I like Tinkerbell. She's not a fucking fairy.
No.
She's not even actually a pixie, because according to the Disney thing with the Tinkerbell, she's a pixie. She's not even actually a pixie. A pixie is something else completely different.
Yes.
Tinkerbell doesn't exist. I like Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell's cute and funny and fun for the show, and you get all the sprinkly lights. That's not a thing.
No, and it's one of the reasons why why we talk about things like superheroes, modern franchises, things like that. It's because these are the stories people know. And it's when you are actually learning about the gods traditionally, in a traditional society, it would be a story that happened over the hill, or this is the ancestral god, or this is the one everybody knows. It's one of the reasons why, if you think about it, the first thing that Christianity did before it completely tried wiping out the old ways, our actual gods, was they just made their god the most important. So the first one you hear about, it's almost like spiritual imprinting. You know, like how baby birds will hatch and then the first thing they see is the mama. It's kind of the same thing in a way. But all our stories are sacred stories, and don't necessarily seek out the gods. If you live nobly and truly and honorably with strength, courage, and wisdom, any of them that actually have interest in you will find their way to you. And if they don't, live a great, grand life that there will be songs sung of, even if it's just what a great grandpa you were.
Yeah.
And with that, the lore keeper's out.
All right, and I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to say just slow down, enjoy the ride down the 2-track trail through the forest, and have fun looking around. Just relax. It's all right. You're not broken. You're a little sore, but you're not broken. And we'll see you guys next week.